I'm thrilled to have her join us today. Please join me in welcoming Laurie.
Hi, Jill. Great to be here.
So great to have you with us. It feels like it's been a long time, but also just yesterday. So I'm just thrilled to see you again.
Same, likewise.
Let's just get started by, maybe you could tell us in your own words, a little bit about your impressive career, your own story. Where should we start?
Well, you know what? I thought I'd mentioned that I'm an Alberta transplant, and I actually took a marketing and a finance degree. And, you know, probably the same with you. A lot of folks ask me about being a female in tech and almost assume that I've got a coder background. Well, I kind of made my way in with a product manager type focus. My first job was at TELUS back in 1989, if you can believe it. And I suppose I learned early how to put a price tag on an idea and how to influence engineers. And that's obviously, you know, served me well through the years. From a software perspective, my first job was running Quicken. It's now an obsolete technology or software platform, but it was in 1999, and that's when Y2K hit. And honestly, it was the best first job in software because everyone on the planet upgraded their software program out of fear of Y2K, for those of you that were around back then. 5 years into it taught me about revenue and customer experience. And then I had another 7 years at a company called Sage, which really taught me about EBITDA and consolidation. It was a pretty tough job, but it's actually what got me out here to Vancouver. I came out to run Simply Accounting, an awesome product that was founded here, and then eventually ACPAC and others. So I joined Galvanize in 2011, as you said. Feels like such a long time ago. And it was at the invitation of the founder then to break all of the rules that he created in the first place. And some of you may know, we actually got our start in 1972 at the UBC. A professor and a handful of students wrote an algorithm that ultimately became ACL. And then we rebranded to Galvanize. So 10 years of breaking a lot of rules and driving a lot of industry firsts with the, you know, kind of the endorsement of the founder. It was just an incredible experience.
That's awesome. I want to dig a little bit deeper, if I can, into a few of the things that you were just talking about there. Maybe we'll just start with that somewhat unusual experience with a founder who said, you know what, I think I don't want to sell my business. I think I want to see my business scale. And I wonder if someone else is appropriate to bring in at this stage. That's not as common as it could be, maybe should be, right? In BC.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that dynamic.
I think, as you said, it was a very unusual thing for a founder to bring me on. And there were bets all over town, perhaps even some folks on this call, on how long I would last. You know, a lot of folks gave me 3 months before I get fired or before I'd quit. Because usually, you know, founders, if they invite someone in, they don't really want to give up control. And Harold, our founder, was awesome. He was very authentically ready to pass the baton. He was, you know, kind of in the background for me. He was this incredible resource, but he never meddled. And it allowed me to be very credible, you know, and influential with employees. And of course, I ended up lasting 10 years. So we did pretty good on that front. You know what it makes me think about, Jill, when I first, you know, met the BC Tech community, I hate to say it was actually when I started the job here at Galvanize. You know, there was the right conversation around, you know, challenges with talent and, you know, school systems not producing enough young folks. But there was another problem back then. I thought there wasn't a lot of kind of seasoned executive talent. And, you know, I was maybe one of the folks that fell into that, and Harold found me. And, you know, he and I brought on a seasoned executive team to lead us to this $1 billion outcome. I just emphasize that now because here 10 years later, there's an influx of seasoned executive talent in BC Tech with all of this amazing kind of unicorn activity. And that gives founders here, a lot of opportunity to, if they're ready to, rather than sell, maybe bring someone else on to drive their business, or perhaps to recruit that kind of talent to their board.
I totally agree with you. It's something that's been one of the most positive aspects of watching the tech sector the last 10 years, is to see people grow in terms of the ceiling of their ambitions and the experience of execs that is at a much richer level today. So it's really exciting. We can always do with more, but it is a significant change. So let's talk a little bit more about that Galvanize story. So you brought in a senior experienced talent team, and you sought to take this high potential but unrealized potential business to the next level. Where did you start? What did you prioritize? What were the key points along the way?
One thing that Harold, our founder, and I did is we spent a lot of time with private equity and bankers. We built relationships on a very kind of targeted way that fared well for us, in terms of our outcome. But I always avoided those investors that had a playbook. And I say that because guess what? If I look back, honestly, we and I had a playbook. And I'll mention right now, I'm on 5 boards. I'm on 5 boards now, 4 of which are software. And I find myself referring to this playbook. And, I'm going to share what it is. And, everybody knows it. But focused on it really, really does matter. And so, of course, I was hired initially to fix culture. And, culture isn't a cost center. An HR leader, in my opinion, isn't something that should report to the CFO. Culture is a strategic lever. And if you kind of manage your people agenda with that kind of mindset, you can create crazy results. And so my very big focus in the beginning, and it probably took about a year and change to really start changing our culture. And that was about creating belief, and by finding people that had courage and putting them in charge. So, fundamentally, my greatest gift of experience at Galvanize was to learn how to lead a changing culture. Number 2, one of my favorite things, and this will sound academic, total addressable market, TAM. We had a piece of paper that we used in almost every communication, and it was a picture of a $41 billion TAM. And when we first introduced it, people were like, that sounds like bullshit. I mean, that's like way too big. You got to be kidding us. What was remarkable is when I joined, we were living in a $2 billion TAM. So we were able to, in time, create a very compelling, believable story about how we were going to get ourselves out of a sandbox. We sold a very specific point solution to a very narrow type of buyer. And what our TAM allowed us to do was drive an expansion agenda, both from a product and from a buyer, and even from a geographical perspective. So it was a very quantifiable tool that significantly informed our R&D strategy, what we would build, our M&A strategy, what we would buy, and then our go-to-market investments, in terms of how we would sell. So TAM is the second greatest thing since sliced bread. I'll mention the third thing, and I probably don't really need to say it to anyone in this crowd, business model. We had to transition from a perpetual on-prem solution to a SaaS subscription model. We did that actually in 1 year, probably because we were crazy and didn't know what we were doing, but we did it in 1 year. That was, a fantastic move for us because, as everybody here knows, compound forward recurring revenue growth is the path to higher valuations. One of the biggest challenges of a business in software is around go-to-market. And, we were very mathematical about our go-to-market sales and marketing unit. We had a project, for example, called Project H2O, Pour Water. And it was about formulaically knowing when you needed to hire more people. How many of us have been in a situation where you throw a lot of money and bodies at a revenue growth agenda, but you actually don't hit your target? And so to understand kind of the cause and effect and be mathematical about when to hire those functions, that was something that started working for us. And then I'll just say lastly, brand. This may be less relevant for some folks here, but we were ACL, we were audit command language. Doesn't get a lot more sexy than that. And because we've been around since 1972, we're afraid of changing our brand. And I am amazed at how instant the impact was in our rebrand to Galvanize. We became legitimized with buyers well beyond audit. And coincident with an acquisition we did at the time, we got on everybody's radar. And so, as I said, I didn't have those things, in mind when I joined Galvanize, I with the exception of culture. But those 5 things combined to, materially influence our outcome. And I find myself using them with the 4 other software boards that I'm on right now.
That's fantastically insightful. So I've taken a note of those 5 things. So culture, TAM, total addressable market, make sure you're looking at a big enough problem. Business model, really think about how you're going to realize profitability. Go to market and being aggressive on that, and then brand and how it can transform a business and help you realize your potential. It's amazing. Thank you for the playbook. We'll share it far and wide. But I love that it's so back to the basics and the fundamentals that we all sort of know, but somehow lose sight of sometimes day to day in a business.
For sure. Jill, I'll mention we had a $1 billion heat map. I'd never done one before. And I built this with a lady on my board, and we ultimately negotiated into the hallways. And something maybe this audience might want to consider. One thing I'm fascinated by is just how uncomfortable people are with kind of putting a forward number out there, whether it's a TAM kind of exercise or it's just a financial projection. We always had like a 3 to 5 year rolling forecast. We had this $1 billion heat map that went along with it. Our goal was actually to go public. And so we had that, what are the milestones for us to, attain $1 billion outcome and be ready to go public. And those would be, classic financial things, but they were also around customer experience. They were around C-suite profile. They're around board profile. They're around accessible TAM. And, it's another thing I'm using now with the other software companies I'm on the board of is, let's paint this $1 billion heat map. Let's get uncomfortable in terms of, predicting what 3 or 5 years from now looks like. Let's expose, where we're really strong and where we're actually quite weak. And let's put that up on the wall and make sure everybody sees it.
You see, there's a theme there that comes back to what you were saying about culture. So culture, think of it as a strategic asset, not a cost. But there was something else that you said, which is about creating belief in the team that they can do it, and then finding courageous people and putting them in charge. What's the difference between a courageous leader or a leader that sets goals that are almost scaring themselves? How do you find people like that? And how do you build a culture that is centered around that?
Well, listen, maybe it's, probably most leaders are courageous. Maybe what was unique for us is, we also allowed ourselves to be vulnerable. And, we were fairly transparent around, we have big goals, but we're also human beings. And this is scary. I was very open about not being perfect. And I was also, perhaps brave. And I had a lot of conviction around, what the future could look like. And, maybe the opportunity to see that in your leader encourages people in an organization to then act like that. And so I'd say maybe for us, courage was pervasive. because we created an environment where, the CEO and the C-suite, not only were they courageous, but they were transparent and they were human beings that actually failed along the way. And so it didn't become my story or the C-suite story. It became everybody's story. Everybody kind of had a piece of ink on this plan. And we learned how to be courageous. And it is probably worth emphasizing. I mean, when I joined, we weren't like that. We'd almost become paralyzed by risk aversion. And, we had to create a case for change. And one of my favorite sayings is, leaders create a future that otherwise was not going to happen. That's what we did. And we did it by embracing what we didn't know, by making promises that we didn't know how to keep, and then living up to our word. We did that. That become a mantra for our organization. So creating a case for change, in my situation, that was really important because I joined something that was already near 25 years old. So I had to unstick it.
I find that fascinating. So listen, now you've got a different kind of seat, right? So now you're not the CEO within a company. Your role now is on these boards. What different perspective does that bring? Does it reinforce what you thought before? Does it challenge what you thought before? What does that perspective bring to you now?
So I'm on 5 boards, 1 not-for-profit. I'm on 3 that are PE-backed, privately held companies, and I'm on 1 publicly traded company called Constellation. I'll talk about that one in a minute. The 3 that are PE-backed, they would range in size from 10 to 90 million US, so just kind of small, medium, and large. And I'd say, this is a little bit in the moment, just based on what I'm working on right now. I'm amazed how uncomfortable some of them are with putting a number out there that's 3 to 5 years from now. And we just never did that. I mean, maybe that's normal, maybe that's ever even right. But if you're just kind of living in the next 3 to 6 to 12 months, you probably lose a lot of opportunity to take bigger risks because, a lot of what we did, we needed time. We needed many, many years to do what we did, not just many, many months. So I feel like, what I'm observing is, a short-term focus. I'm also, I guess, things like TAM, we also had a 1-page strategic plan, things that people might kind of think are philosophical, kind of BS. They really, really matter. Our 1-page strat plan, values, vision, mission. Oh man, it was a marriage vow because we were in the hallways and we got people to co-author it. It became a marriage vow. It mattered to us. It mattered to 500 employees. I'd say, companies that do that well get further ahead, as opposed to, the CEO and the C-suite, chirped out a couple of values off the side of their desk. That's a real missed opportunity. I'll just briefly comment the one anomalous one I'm on, Constellation Software. As folks in tech, we should all celebrate this organization. Shame on me. I really did not appreciate that as the second largest company on the TSX, they're a $47 billion market cap, Canadian headquartered software company. They are doing remarkable things with an M&A strategy. Now, I've always run my businesses with you earn your right to M&A by doing well organically, and I guess I'd still fundamentally agree with that. But the Constellation skill is fundamentally around M&A. So just thought I would share that someplace that I'm fundamentally going to get an education on. I'm really looking forward to my MBA there in the next few years.
I'm looking forward to hearing more when you're got your feet under the table there a little bit longer. But that's such a Canadian disease, right? We under celebrate success and under investigate and understand what some of the leaders are doing. So it's something we can all do better at. Listen, there was something that you mentioned about the private equity backed software companies. And I wanted to ask you about private equity.
Yeah.
And how to partner with them successfully, what to think about, what to embrace, what to avoid. So give us your insights on that.
Yeah. I hadn't had any experience with PE before I joined Galvanize, and I am so grateful for the kind of MBA I got there as well. Right from the beginning, I started joining Harold, our founder, in conversations he'd had over time, and like probably most people on this call, we always got outreaches, but we were very purposeful about taking those calls and continuing to take them with certain PE. And, we were quite particular around kind of the combination of making sure that they would value us in terms of what we were worth, of course, but they would value our values. So we used to assess our PE partners based on, kind of the math, but also their buy-in to culture. And, clearly not all PE is bought into culture. And, over time, we were able to suss those folks out. And I think importantly, we always practice the kind of, we're going to say what we're going to do, and then we're going to do what we said. And so these PE folks got to know us over time. And, for example, we converted our business to subscription in 1 year. We told them we're going to convert it to subscription in 1 year. And they're like, yeah, right. And then we came back a year from now and we said, yeah, we did it in a year. And they're like, holy shit. And when you get like examples like that in your back pocket over and over and over again, you develop a lot of credibility that you wouldn't have if you're meeting an investor in a raise for the first time. We didn't have to prove ourselves perhaps the way that others did. I'll just mention in 2020, when we went into our process, because of all of that history, we had the privilege of kind of handpicking, I'll describe it in 3 swim lanes, what investment bankers we wanted to work with. And I was talking to about 5, what PE we'd like to work with. And I was talking to about 10. And then what strategics we would consider, and ultimately we sold to Diligent as strategic. But imagine those are 16 plates on sticks, and everybody wants to talk to you not just once, but every month. I was probably spending at least 50% of my time just managing those relationships. And I'll say this, and obviously, you need to build a strong enough team around you that they can run the day to day. And that allowed me to point my time at these relationships. And, when I talk to folks about delegation and prioritization, I think a compelling question is, what really matters that only you uniquely can do? And for me, that was a good recipe for me pointing my time at these PE relationships. And, obviously we were able to create a great outcome by building credibility over the years, and quite frankly, creating a little bit of a bidding war at the end because of time invested there.
That's incredibly insightful. Thank you for that. And just that the time arc over which that needs to be developed is really worth remembering. So, okay, I've got a few more questions. I just want to give a quick heads up to my audience, though. Please do drop your questions in the chat, because we'll come to those in just a moment. And I know you guys must have lots of questions for Laurie, but I've just got a few more before I go there. So I did want to ask, it's a pretty amazing achievement that you're the first woman who has, as CEO, led a company to a $1 billion US. Again, I always like to emphasize that. That's more than $1 billion Canadian. And my little friend here is just going to say hello. Congratulations on your unicorn status. How did that feel? Does it feel important to break through that ceiling and to create something that others can aspire to?
Listen, I have to admit that my whole career, I've never really focused too much on the female side of it. Though, as my daughter got older, it started becoming more important to me because it was important to her. And, to be able to share that type of outcome with my daughter and her friends not to mention other females in our great community. That feels fantastic. And, you know, I was scratching down here. I mean, there's a long lineup now of great female leaders in tech, yourself included, right? Christine Stewart, Catherine Room, Shannon Rogers, Judy Hess, Catherine Dahl, Christy Watts. I mean, just to name a few. And so how cool is it that that is, you know, more normal? And so, yeah, great gratitude. I think I could do a better job, you know, being more overt about, you know, I guess what it took to be successful as a female. But I'll tell you what mattered more to me about that outcome. I hate to say it, it's actually the $1 billion. And here's why. Our mission statement when I joined ACL, now Galvanize, 10 years ago, was to be the most trusted $1 billion software company. Now that may seem a little bit basic, but when you know, ACL was in its early years, there were scandals like WorldCom and Enron, and there weren't as many trusted companies at the time because there was a lot of corruption. And of course, we sold to auditors. So that language was really meaningful, to be the most trusted $1 billion software company. But guess what? Not a single person at Galvanize believed it. And, you know, I walk in, it's, you know, $1 billion is the strategy, and everybody's like looking at me like, you're shitting me. Like, we're not making the investments needed. We don't have the organization that we require to achieve that outcome. So back to the opening comments around belief. I mean, we had to create belief. We had to draw, you know, a compelling TAM, and then we had to convince people that it was there. And then we had to formulaically, you know, outline, well, how are we going to attack it? Be that from a product expansion or an M&A or a go-to-market expansion. And so to have the $1 billion outcome on the end of my time there, given the $1 billion goal line when I joined, that felt really remarkable. And how cool is it that $1 billion, I mean, we're popping these out now, what, every second week here in BC Tech?
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
It's amazing. I can't keep up anymore, which is fabulous. That's exactly what I want.
We need like a 10 billion goal now or something.
Exactly. We're going to raise the bar. You know what I love about you, Laurie, and I've said this to you, but I'd love to say it in front of an audience, is there's lots of people who set out big, hairy, audacious goals, but there's not that many people who put in place the discipline and the detailed plan and the culture and the team that can deliver. And there's not that many people that can instill others with the belief that, yes, they can. And you're one of those. And you do it because you deliver results. And I understand exactly what you're saying when you say that $1 billion matters, because it's a fact. And that's something to be really, really proud of. Listen, let's see if we can broaden it out a little bit and inspire others with what they can do in their businesses tomorrow. So when you reflect on leadership, both your own, but what you've seen in other leaders and others on your team, what do you think is the most important personal quality that a leader actually brings to the table?
Well, I think it picks up on the themes of this chat so far. I guess I'd say two things. Relatability might seem like a bit of a plain word, but just to humanize the role, to share your shit, to have big goals, but to, you know, coincidentally share your mistakes. It makes you relatable as a leader. And, you know, if I'm a person watching someone like that in the crowd, I can say, wait a minute, I had that happen to me. I'd made that mistake. That person's just a normal human being. And if they can do it, I can do it. And so I think by being relatable, you can inspire others, you can inspire your employees to do bigger things than maybe they imagined. And, you know, I think in doing so, you know, the fundamental requirement of any leader is the ability to create belief. And, you know, it's, you know, how do you do that? How did I do it? You know, getting in the hallways, you know, making sure people could see their ideas amongst my own. I mean, the easiest way to get someone to buy into something is if it's their idea, right? And so we spent a lot of time drawing a picture of the future that people could recognize because they co-authored it. And that's, you know, that was, you know, really the essence that was one of the keys to why we were successful, because we were in the hallways, and we were able to get people to talk and to participate on a broad scale, and in doing so, we created belief.
That's awesome. Coming back to, this is just my last question before we open up to the floor, but coming back to BC Tech and the BC Tech ecosystem, you've had a long-standing involvement with BC Tech when you first came to BC.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you were on our board for many years. You were a fabulous board chair. You were the board chair when I took over as CEO, and I learned a lot from you. I have to say, it was a great privilege and honor for me to discover that the judges had decided that you were the winner of BC Tech's 2021 Technology Impact Award for Person of the Year. I hope it was a proud moment for you. How did it make you feel?
I was so unexpected, honestly, Jill. It was so meaningful to kind of see this recognition from our peer group. And I certainly don't take it as kind of personal recognition. It just, for me, it legitimized for everybody at Galvanize that it was worth it. We had to unstick something that was 25 years old, and it was hard as hell. And this outcome really legitimized the effort. I found myself thinking as I was, a few days before the TIAs, my first TIA was in 2012, and ACL, we had a table and we were in the back of the room, and we just felt like nobodies. Like we hadn't really been that involved with the community for a while. I think there was a slide that had our name on it and was 6 font. Like we were the 6 font. And, we had a lot of work to do to authentically bring an emphasis back on building a relationship with the BC Tech community, and obviously the association in particular. And we spent a lot of time, and I'm very thankful for that relationship now with you, but with Bill Tam at the time. We were, one of the initial contributors to the BC Technology Hubs. And geez, it seems like so long ago, right? I was involved, I was chairing the software sector CEO group. It was just so amazing to get to know a bunch of mini-me's and share like the real stuff. And, I don't need to tell anyone on this call because they're here, but it was very important for us to find some time to build the relationships with this community, because, we've maybe got a unique vantage point here sitting in Vancouver and pointed at the world. For us, 3% of our revenues were in Canada, maybe less than 0.5% from BC. And yet 3/4 of our operating budget was out of this beautiful province. So that just, obviously creates a unique kind of vantage point. And it's really important that we know each other. And that's what we focused on doing. So thank you so much for the privilege of, that recognition. It means a lot to me and also to Galvanize.
Thank you. Well, let's switch gears now and go to the audience. And I can promise you, Laurie will be happy to answer any question you might want to ask. So don't hesitate. Let me just have a quick look at the chat now. So congrats on all your success, Laurie. Thank you for sharing how important, strategically important culture is. As CEO and a board member, what do you advise companies to do to measure the positive impact of culture?
That's an interesting question, because it's framed measuring the impact of culture. Because there could be a bit of a laundry list of how to measure culture. And I'll just kind of mention briefly, we had an employee net promoter score metric. We measured, ultimately on a quarterly basis. It was very transparent. If I had to pick any one way to measure culture, it would be that. In terms of measuring the outcome of a culture agenda, I had this, we were at one point recognized as one of Canada's most admired cultures. And we did this presentation that it had it was a line graph that showed our ENPS, Employee Net Promoter Score, over time. When we first started measuring it, we were 0. And through COVID, we peaked at about 72. Industry average in tech is about 19, just for laughs. So we had this graph that showed our eNPS over time. And then I overlaid on that our valuation over time. It was a fascinating thing. And if I could put it this way, you know, it was one of those kind of, you know, prove there's a God. It's you know, we had to, what was happening is our eNPS was going, lifting faster than our valuation. So it was a leading indicator. But, you know, while it was spiking up, our valuation was being, you know, maybe delayed because there was other things that we had to do. We had to convince analysts around our TAM. We had to get our customers into new cloud-based technology. And so our valuation lagged the improvement in eNPS. But when those lines both started lifting, it was an incredible story to tell. And, you know, for me, it's if you have culture as an agenda, be patient for the impact on shareholders. And you know, maybe attempt to do a graph like that. It was a fairly interesting exercise.
That's fabulous. I love the idea that eNPS would be a leading indicator of valuation. Let's test that. I love it. Listen, another fantastic question in the chat from Peter. Can you expand on what you mean, what in the hallways means to you, and specifically, how can one be in the hallways if you've got a remote workforce? I think that's a really great question.
Such a good question, and definitely, you know, even me had to learn how to be in the hallways a different way. I mean, maybe just in the most basic sense, when I joined Galvanize, we were doing town halls. You know, I did a lot of them at the beginning, but even through the end of 10 years, we were doing town halls once a month, sometimes virtually. And, you know, physically, you know, in a 3D way, maybe always has the highest impact, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do them virtually if that's your only option. And I think the key thing there is just to be a relatable human being, to somehow get people to talk. I think that's, you know, that's perhaps another skill that a leader has. And so we were very committed to kind of these informal chats, kind of like we're having right now. And people were brave. It just, you know, they, in our culture, encouraged people to be brave. We put the moose on the table. So I never, ever had problems with people asking hard questions. We used to do quarterly webinars just to build on this. We'd have 500 people on the phone from all around the world. We had to do them at 7 a.m. And we would typically run 45 minutes over because people were free to ask us anything they wanted. And we would get really hard questions. And if you're put yourself out there and if you're transparent, you're going to get that in the hallway feeling, whether it's virtual or not. And I think the key is, you know, have to have multiple media, whether it's a survey or it's a town hall or it's a webinar or it's Slack and you're just accessible through chat or it's one-on-ones. You know, as long as you've got multimedia and as long as you show up like legit and transparent, then that, you know, you're going to have an effective in the hallways process.
That's awesome. Listen, I'm going to ask you a question because you just referred to it in passing and not everybody knows the story. So there was something in the Galvanize culture about the moose, putting the moose on the table. Tell the audience about the moose.
You know, one thing about culture, I learned at Galvanize, I had no idea. Actually, symbols, language, values really matter. And you know, when I first joined, I introduced the symbol, put the moose on the table. And in fact, all of our boardrooms and many cubicles are littered with mooses if you go into our office. And it's like the elephant in the corner of the room. It's that I've got something uncomfortable I need to say. And by, you know, putting the moose on the table, we created an expectation that people would have those conversations. And, you know, people would announce it. Guess what? I'm going to put the moose on the table right now. I need you to know this. And so it was a very powerful, symbol for us. In fact, I got even mooses here in my office. And, you know, I'll mention one other thing that impacted culture. It's kind of symbolic. We had a company car, 1972 Gran Torino, best $6,000 I ever spent. Now, our company as an algorithm was born in 1972, but we had this ridiculous, obnoxious Gran Torino show up in 2016 as a company car. Any employee could use it. And, it was a metaphor for a startup or a restartup. We took that piece of junk bought out of a moose jaw, a barn in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. We polished it up, and it was like this badge of honor to drive it around town. And it's kind of like Galvanize itself in terms of the transformation we made.
Laurie, it doesn't happen often, but I literally cannot think of a better way to end this conversation than with the image of a moose on the table and a Gran Torino driving around town. You've really helped us understand Galvanize's culture, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today.